Tua's concussion protocol. Now, this was one of the most talked about events that happened. It was on Thursday Night Football because Tua took a big hit, was sacked, and was concussed. The way they handled Tua's concussions, because I feel like now that we are a week removed from the event, we can safely say that he was concussed on Sunday versus the Bills. And Thursday, he got concussed again, and that's 2 concussions in a short amount of time. Is this a sign that the NFL is still handling concussions poorly?
It's unfortunate because if you would have asked me this prior to the Bengals game, I would have said no. If, at least in recent time, if we saw a player go down with a concussion, the NFL had been super strict. You're not coming back into the game. We saw Patrick Mahomes taken out of a playoff game because he had a concussion. And we're not talking about a regular quarterback. We're talking about Patrick Mahomes, the cream of the crop, was taken out of one of the most important games of the season. Thankfully, his team was able to hold on and win the game, but he was pulled. Prior to the game against the Bengals, I would have said no, we don't have a problem. However, Tua goes down. Granted, he was brought to the ground really hard by the tackle. It did not seem like one of those hits that should have had the reaction that Tua ended up having, where it looked like his just neurological system was just completely out of whack. He was doing some interesting hand gestures. It's just one of those things that is just engraved in your head when you see it. If you haven't seen it, don't look it up. It's honestly, it's a horrible play. And I hated that ESPN, who was the one streaming the game? NFL Network? Amazon, excuse me. Amazon showed it from every angle. They must have showed it like 17 times.
You don't think that
I wasn't a fan of seeing
necessary?
It over and over again. Showing the replay?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Because I think
when Kevin Ware broke his shin, did we need to see it as many times as we did?
I think although it is a ugly sight to see, that is the reality of football.
The only reason why they show it that many times is because people are kind of sick and they like to see stuff like that for whatever reason. And I'm not saying that that's your reason. Of course, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that's the main reason why they show it, because immediately someone gets hurt, he's like, oh, I need to see the replay. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to me, but I'm with you on that point. It's very fair. It's a brutal sport. It's a very barbaric sport, and unfortunately, instances like this do occur. I'm old enough to remember Johnny Knox getting folded in half. That's one of the worst plays I've ever seen in my life. This game is it pays a heavy toll to suit up and play in between those lines. You have to be a different type of human being. But going forward, there should not be any more events like this. I wanted Tua to play this weekend because selfish reasons. I'm going to the game. But of course, Tua is my favorite player, one of my favorite players. I don't want to see him in a position that he could be put into further damage. And the NFL cannot afford to put Tua on the field, especially after seeing the reaction that he had to having a concussion. I just believe personally, you shouldn't have even sent him out there in the first place. You understood that watching that replay against the Buffalo Bills, his equilibrium was already off. Even if you wanted to blame it on his back, there's no way you could have watched that by itself and think something's not right.
There's
How
actually
can you think that?
The NFL, I don't know if it's gone into like protocol yet, but they're changing the protocol where if your like motor stability is off, even if it's not a head injury, because previously the only way you were pulled is if you had motor instability, which is you're wobbly plus a head injury, then you could come out. They're changing that protocol now to if you have any sort of motor instability where you're wobbly, you're getting pulled out of the game and you can't come back.
It's like when Mahomes got hit and he got to be taken out of the game. He had similar symptoms to Tua when he got hit against the Bills, not against the Bengals. With the Bills, Patrick kind of just stumbled and fell to the ground. Same with Tua. There should have been no reason for him to be brought back into the game. And rightfully so. The doctor that cleared him to come back into the game was fired. Yes, you can have a back injury because of the spine and it be related to your brain because, yes, the central nervous system is the spine and the brain. But in that moment of him wobbling and falling to the floor, you should have just played it safe. This is your franchise guy. This is a guy that the league is super excited about. Every single news network is speaking about Tua because of the exciting things that are going on in Miami, him being at the forefront of that. You couldn't risk putting him in that position. And you put him in that position, And now you could possibly affect his career forever. It was irresponsible on the Dolphins' part.
I think it's a clear sign that the NFL still handles concussions poorly. And the rule that you just mentioned, which was an exception, which allowed Tua to go back into the game, the motor instability thing, that is a part of it. It's basically the NFL saying that, well, going forward now, you don't have to go back. You're unable to go back into the game if you have a concussion. That's basically what they're saying. Before, you can have a concussion, but as long as you say you're okay, you can go back out there, and they're not really going to do much to stop you from doing it. So I think going forward, hopefully this is how things get treated. But I think Tua going out there is really a result of multiple things that are working in conjunction with one another. For one, it's football and masculinity culture in itself. I mean, Tua putting yourself in his position, somebody who has to prove himself week in and week out because he is not a proven player. He does have to prove himself so the Dolphins can fully trust him to be their guy going forward. Tua is not on one of the longer leashes in the NFL. So he obviously feels pressure to play because of that. He feels pressure to play because he wants to be there for his teammates. And really, masculinity culture and football culture is kind of like you got to play through injuries. And NFL players mention it all the time that they play through all sorts of injuries. And as a quarterback, if you see defensive linemen, your receivers, your offensive line getting hurt on every single play and they're fighting through these injuries, you feel more pressure to do that for yourself. And I feel like that was definitely in play. The protocols to protect players in the first place, although the NFL has made strides in it, this is also a league that after Dr. Omalu discovered CTE, the NFL tried to sweep it under the rug as much as possible because it damages their bottom line. That's as simple as that. If you're a professional league and you know that the truth about your league, in which is head injuries and how these players turn out after their playing careers are over, the public starts to perceive you differently. And at the time when the CTE thing did become a big topic, the bottom line was definitely hurt. There's a brand new fantasy app. It's called Boom Fantasy. You got over-unders, player props. You got matchups. This player versus that player. That's personally my favorite and long shots. You can win 40 times your money. And if I'm not mistaken, Joel, NBA is coming soon.
Yes, sir. NBA will be in the app in the next 10 days or so. Wow. I believe opening night is October 19th, so we'll have stuff up a few days beforehand. That's going to be fun because we have it every night. You don't have to wait till Monday, Thursday.
Did you get your code? The League Pass?
I did get my code for League Pass.
I got my code too.
Yep, that's amazing.
That's from 2K, right?
Yes.
That's tough.
Amazing.
That's fire.
So if you guys haven't already, download the Boom Fantasy app right now. Link is in our description or in the caption wherever you're watching. And also, we have to realize that the doctor was fired that allowed Tua to go back into play. A brain injury is something that's still unknown. We don't know much about the brain still. Like it's new. These are new studies. CTE, you cannot diagnose somebody with that until they are dead and you can examine the brain. So no head injury is one and the same. So that's why I think doctors do get some leeway in this situation, because the symptoms for one person that has a concussion may not be the same for somebody else or any head injury. So that's also into play. But I thought after Tua suffered that hit versus the Bills, he should have never came back in that game, for one. And he should have never played in the Bengals game. It was too short notice, and you put him in harm's way because off second impact syndrome, which is having 2 concussions in a short amount of time, you can die from that. People have died from that. So Tua, it's not just about football with him. It's not just about saving your franchise quarterback. It's about saving this guy's life and livelihood after football. Because the brutal truth about football, and we were reminded with it with Tua's situation, is that football is a gruesome sport. Football is a sport that these guys go out there, lay their bodies down on the line, and most of them are probably okay with the fact and maybe assumption that when their playing career is over, a couple years after that, they might not have their total cognitive function there because of what they suffered when they played football. And that's the harsh reality of the sport. And that's something that I've battled with when I watch it before, because we are watching people in real time. Basically, in the moment, they are premier athletes, but later down in life, they do suffer with anxiety, depression due to CTE. And I think that's a hard truth of the NFL. And that's why I wasn't against the replays being shown, because I think as much as we love football, we have to be aware that there's a dark side to it too. It's not all just roses and rainbows around football. It's a gruesome sport. It's a modern day gladiator sport, and that's what it is.
I'm in and out on that stance. I'm in on it because you make very valid points. Yes, you want to make people aware of how barbaric the sport is. But I'm out on the sense of, let's think of the individual. Let's think about the individual's family. Do you think the family wants to see that on repeat? Do we think that Tua wants to sit there and watch his face, his hands discontorted? I don't think that would be the case for me.
Amazon also did it way more than normal, I feel like.
I could not agree more.
Usually when you see
could not agree more.
I mean, it's different if you see like a guy like break his leg and it goes sideways or something. Maybe that's different. But like even that, like remember the Dak injury? They showed it once maybe, like when he broke his ankle a couple of years ago. This was constantly over and over, and you like, I don't know why they wanted to do that. But just to real quick get to the question, because it's hard, because when you have brain injuries, there's no room for error, right? When you have concussions, there's no room for error. So even if you're right 1,000 times, that 1,001st time, if you fuck up, that's what people are going to point to. And that's what happened with this Tua situation, because over the last 5, 7, 8 years, the NFL has gotten significantly better in treating concussions and noticing concussions and trying to prevent them as much as they can, right? You have spotters up in the box. You have independent neurologists who, outside of this Tua situation, for the most part, seem to have done really good for the league, because you don't have doctors and trainers who might have, pressure from the coach or whoever it might be saying, we need this guy on the field, we need him to play. You have independent people there, so there's no way to sway anything like that. And as well as better helmets. We saw it this year with the extra padding, not as much hitting in practice as well. So I think all of this long-term is going to benefit players. But when you have a situation like this, it's going to stand out. And you're not going to talk about all of the other things that they've done positively for players who've had these brain injuries. I think we saw it this past week. There was a couple players like Cameron Brate who had a concussion who was pulled out really quickly, and a couple other players well. So I'm curious to see the rest of the season how concussions are treated, because they might be a lot more strict, because you don't want to have that Tua situation on the field broadcasted to everybody, because it reminds them of the harsh reality of the NFL, like you were saying, Joel, and the ramification it has on players' long-term health.
You all said some great things, but I think it really just comes down to the organization. They just got to be more careful. I think they got to be more aware. He got hit on Sunday, has a game on Thursday. That is 3-4 days to really get ready after you just had a concussion. My little cousin plays high school football. He got hurt. He got a concussion on a Friday. He didn't play until 2 weeks later. That's high school football. And with the NFL having all these rules, having all these they have all the highest paid guys, all the money, all the equipments. You just got to be a little bit more aware. You saw the way Tua got hit. He got up, wobbled back down, and then you saw on Thursday he was damn near out. Fingers, like it was a disgusting sight.
He was done.
So you just, as an organization, especially as the doctor, like I know doctors, they got a lot of them on. It's a lot to learn, and we have to pay that leeway. But you saw the way he got up after he wobbled. You got to just be careful. You don't need to play this game. Take the week off. As much as you love football, your life is more important. Your health is more important. You have a family. You have a father. You have a mother. You have a brother. Like, you have these other things that want to see you walk, have a good life, smile, get married, all this good stuff. And injuries like that, you just got to be more careful.
It's like Andrew Luck, Luke Kuechly. Andrew Luck, not so much, because his was more body injuries, not so much his head. But Luke Kuechly, specifically, these two guys decided to walk away from the game at 29 because they understood that the toll that this game would take on a person's body for the long term. They said, you know what? I have my money. I'm set for life. Why am I going to continue to put myself through torture?
Even if it's not concussions, and this is the hard truth about what the players go through as well, even if it's not a concussion, doctors have projected that each football game that players playing is like getting into a car crash. Like, it's like crashing your car into a brick wall, basically. That's the amount of impact they suffer through each game. Even if it's not a concussion, when offensive linemen are facing up against defensive linemen, point to me a play where their helmets are not hitting their helmets. Helmets are hitting their helmets every play. And that's football.
You're talking to linemen?
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
So, like, even with better concussion protocols, which has to happen, it can only prevent it so much. The reality is that the sport in itself is inherently violent.
Yeah.
And it inherently causes these players to suffer through these things in the long term. So how much of that can we prevent and fix for the future? that's still up in the air. I don't think this concussion thing fixes it. It helps it. I don't know if it fixes it, and I think it's something that we all have to sit with when we watch football for our love of football, that although we love this sport, we have to understand that there's another side to it that is very real, and it causes real pain to their families after the football playing career is over. So I think that this is a touchy subject, but it is something that needs to be had, and people need to be aware of it.
Yeah, without a doubt. Hopefully, we don't know how long Tua is going to be out for, but at least sounds like he's in good spirits. It sounds like he's progressing. So, obviously super grateful and thankful that he seems to be out of the woods in terms of nothing severe long term.